The audio wasn't turned on.
Oh.
Do we have to start over? I don't remember what I said.
They couldn't hear us?
No.
No. So anyway, I know we've got a lot to cover, but
So far, we realized that the audio just got turned on. Director Navazio for the recording has just been talking to all the slides that are on there. So that has been what we've
And
been
we will
discussed or hasn't been.
Posting this presentation
Yes.
immediately following.
Yes. So it's really with the slides that are on there and some clarifying questions. Okay.
Last I'll say is on the new development, we're also, as the committee knows, looking at sort of a updating of our kind of impact fee schedule, which is really where some of the infrastructure requirements are for new development. What we're talking about here a little bit more is just the ongoing service level impacts, which generally wouldn't be funded through things like impact fees and developer contributions. And then we just identified a couple other areas. We're looking at potentially how to put some additional resources into our economic development activity, which hopefully has return on that investment in terms of gathering some of the revenue and some of the other.
So the estimates on there, just my back envelope is around $7.5, $8 million, but that not all the items have an estimated item. So at some point, when we're having this broader discussion with the council, we'll have ranges for all of them.
Yes.
Okay.
And part of these is because work is underway to actually come up with that number, including our facilities master plan and the like.
Thank you.
So in the short term, we're hopeful that we're able to navigate through this upcoming fiscal year. There will need to be potentially some realignment of the existing budget. And there's, a handful of options that we will have to, if anything else, where can we relieve some of the burden on the general fund while still, maintaining current service levels and funding levels. I'm just throwing out here that should the need arise to look at any kind of expenditure reductions, each 1% reduction of the budget is about $1.2 million. I want to be very careful with the wording here, but if you're, selective about where we could potentially cut back a little bit, the goal would be to minimize and try to avoid impacts to, direct services to the community. This wouldn't involve, any staffing reductions. It just depends on incrementally how much we would have to rely on expenditure reductions going forward to balance things out or address unfunded needs versus our ability to tap additional revenues. We are also short of ballot measures looking at other areas of enhanced revenue. There's been work already going on previously on increasing the level of cost recovery. Our recreation and library department are currently doing a fee study and looking at some additional cost recovery and fees that will be coming forward to the council, actually to this committee probably first before we come to the council. Planning, building, code enforcement is kind of a constant, making sure that the fees that we're collecting there are appropriate to cover those costs. We added this other bullet because it's I think it's on the work plan. It's been flagged by the council, which is particularly for economic development, if we're successful in potentially clawing back or renegotiating the component of the county's hotel bid assessment, which is the 2% that is assessed.
Clawing back's the right term. How about reinvesting the money that our community infrastructure is generating back into the city? That's how I would say it, or our hotel infrastructure, just to be clear.
I might even elaborate further on clarity, which is that it is a subsidy for the rest of the county that San Rafael is not receiving. I'm pretty fixated on this. Thank you. Thank you for including this. And I had three things I wanted to.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I thought you're
good on this slide. This is a dialogue.
okay.
So as far as revenue enhancements, I do think that the voters did approve Measure G. Things continue to take shape with respect to the cannabis industry. Obviously, it's not this year, But as we consider restoring our tax levels on all of the licensees, but also even in consideration of some successful licensees in the rest of the
Categories.
in the other categories as well. I'd like to see if we can get more optimization in our cannabis tax. And then obviously it's a bullet that's not on there. We do have a 15% reserve. That's not something we'd ever want to go into, but obviously that if it's for a short period of,
Yeah.
that's obviously something we
Yeah.
could consider for the short period, right?
Yeah.
And to that point, that's one of the reasons we raised it in context of the labor agreements, was to really give us and ensure that buffer anticipating this sort of level of deficit.
And then every year that goes by, we're also approaching our pension liability. I want to say cliff, but usually cliff is a bad thing, but this is like, it's a good cliff. Right, going to the good cliff. So, I'm curious, I think in public spaces, when this has been brought up before, it's not recommended that we would take out some sort of loan again, borrow against the future. That's not a great idea. But as each year gets closer, does it not become potentially a better idea?
Can I start with that?
Go ahead.
And then you do the technical piece.
Yeah.
It's still really 7, 8 years out.
Okay.
Which feel it like, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like every year we get closer, it does help with risk mitigation. I think when you look at the actual amount of money, part of that growth like the growth factor, like Paul said, these revenue measures, if we're successful at renewing or, maintaining all of them, we start evaluating what that 20 million-ish dollars is. And
13, 14, but
that amount, which sounds like a ton of money, really gets eaten up pretty quickly with the deferred maintenance and the need to do storm drains. Like, what are we, $8-9 million, April, for one pump station? And that's so it's like, it feels like it's a windfall. It does help with some of these annual deficits for us to kind of like get back to a baseline that we can manage service level as we grow. But I am trying to be really mindful that we are around not over betting on that.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I think it's an important discussion to have, because if we fast forward 20 years from now and we look back, I just want to make certain that the community and whatever council will be occupying these seats doesn't regret that we didn't even at least look at it and have that conversation.
Yeah.
Because while you're saying 13 one time, but this is 13 potentially year over year, it would be a huge difference.
It'll be part of that the 20-year fiscal model. So the tables that show like different assumptions and what the deficit looks like, you can see that even when that cliff happens, we're still not totally recovering, depending upon the assumptions that you build in to the model.
the only thing I would add to that is, to that point, this is in some ways kind of the glide path to where we're at. And we've discussed needing to have that conversation about how to maximize benefit from that and not wait until it's here, but kind of build that in and build it in the plan. I would just say that one idea, as opposed to kind of borrowing against it, is once we have that, that could be a revenue measure that we could use to then like issue some debt and then and pay it off so that we can advance some of the infrastructure work that's needed. So I'm kind of flipping it that way.
Thank you.
As a concept.
I think, yeah, as a concept, I think it accomplishes the same outcome in a different way. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
So going forward, so this gets us a little bit more into the, ballot measure discussion. The first one on the list is the one that has a bit of an urgency to it, which is our library parcel tax. Currently generates $1.2 million a year in support of library operations, and that is set to expire this coming June. So absent action by the council to place a renewal measure or replacement measure on the June ballot, this revenue is scheduled to not carry forward into 26-27. And then we mentioned also the paramedic tax.
Sorry, Paul, do you mind if I pause on the library tax for 1 second? I think it's important just to say that when the governor put the special election on the ballot for November, staff really did a phenomenal job of scrambling and trying to get, because we had potentially a window, right, within 5 days of him calling that election to put it on the November ballot. And then he that didn't pan out because he pulled that.
We're not allowed, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, he overrode the code on that. So I just think it's important for the public also to know that we've done everything we absolutely can to have more than one bite at the apple here with Measure D.
Mhm.
And we did polling
Yeah.
last summer to be prepared for that. So sorry, Paul, I
Which
just
is-
wanted to make sure that was no.
Yeah, the other is sort of the initial list of, potential other measures. I know the city had looked at this a few years ago and did some polling on it, but one potential future ballot measure, which by the way could not be on the June ballot because you cannot have a general purpose tax on the ballot
Yeah.
when members of the legislative body aren't also on the ballot. So you can do a special tax, 2/3 vote requirement in June. Any tax measure requires a 50% plus one vote requirement has to be on the same ballot as members of the legislative body.
At the council.
Under state constitution, yeah, in the Constitution.
And a voter-based initiative can happen in any election.
That's a good question.
We don't have.
Those are like
the answer.
conflicting
No, I don't
provisions.
remember when Measure P was.
Yeah, if it's a.
Well, Measure
Citizen
P
initiative.
went in November of 24.
I think that was strategic, but
Yeah.
it's a good question.
Then again, there's groups out there trying to close the door on citizens initiative
Really?
getting really 50% vote. But we are looking at what a property transfer tax could look like currently as a charter city, which is a requirement of having a property transfer tax. We do have one at the rate of 0.2%, which generates about $1.5 million a year. I have some backup slides if we need to, but probably for another conversation, that of the cities that have property transfer tax, we are on the very low end of the tax rate. We are on the very low end of the per capita property tax revenue that's generated in those cities. And we are, I would say, also on the low end of the property transfer tax as a percent of general fund budgets for cities that have property transfer tax on the books.
What would you say the mean is for, what would be the sweet spot recommendation?
It varies a little bit, and what I would say is, and if we want to later on, I can call up a slide, probably in the 1% range. But it also depends a little bit regionally in larger cities. And this is where we're getting some help from some outside sources to help us navigate. A lot of cities have a kind of a tiered tax rate. So say it's 0.5% for the $1 million or below, and then it bumps up to 0.75% for 2 to 3 million and percent. So they will have kind of a graduated tax rate structure that is something that we will obviously want to look at if there's a willingness and support to do some analysis on this.
This is a ballot measure.
This is a ballot measure, and
2/3 or 50, it's
as a general tax, it would be a
50%.
50%. It would be 50% vote. I think the last time the city looked at this and did some polling, it was in the context of building a new library. So it would have been a special tax measure, which would have been an interesting. But
Yeah.
I think right now, pending feedback from this committee and the council, we'd be looking at this as a general, potential general tax at the appropriate election. There's also, of course, possibility of developing a new parcel tax to bring before the voters. And that could be, any number of, again, we talked about the streets and roads, clearly public safety, there's broader, public services. But these will generally be a 2/3 vote for parcel tax. So And so the key with the parcel taxes generally is that they're really tailored for the need that is requiring the tax. I'm just putting on here that there's clearly the option of looking at, do you increase the TOT, hotel tax, the business license tax? Those don't really generate significant revenue. So, I mean, if you increase the TOT by, go from 10, to 12%, you're getting another, less than $1 million. So, there's a question of whether it's worth going to the voters to increase that or the business license tax, given the marginal revenue. But again, pending feedback, these are all options, but we're tending to focus a little bit, and we'll talk more about our preliminary recommendation, but focusing on potentially a property tax, transfer tax increase.
I did want to mention one thing about the TOT. I do know you're very passionate about this.
Fixated.
Obsessed.
The county has released an economic vitality strategic plan. And, I've been talking to the county executive about a more regional approach to tourism and economic vitality. And in that RFP, San Rafael specifically mentioned, and our economic development plan is actually linked in the RFP. And so the reason I'm just calling that out is I think that there's a real close nexus to what will come out of this plan and how that relates to this kind of reimagining of what a visitors bureau and how to really capture that revenue and get the ROI for San Rafael that we so desire. So I just wanted to flag that as well.
Thank you. So it's in my head when we go through the existing ballot measures. Paramedic does not have a sunset date, but it's capped. Is that correct? And then library parcel tax does have
an expiration date,
and
26.
Property transfer that still has to go to the voter, though.
Yeah, this has to go to so this is in the ballot measure category. The two that aren't on here, but they'll come up later in the later slide is, of course, Measure E and Measure R, 1/2 cent and 3/4 cent and 1/4 cent sales tax, who have expiration dates coming, and there's some early recommendations on how we would approach that over the next several election cycles.
Watching our time.
Yeah. So let me touch real quick on the stormwater fee. This is something that we are needing to look at because stormwater with our system is hugely important. Cities have been woefully unsuccessful in getting voter support for a stormwater fee. I guess unless you run the election right after a major flooding event, sometimes you can be. But there are cities that seem to have had some success recently in running a stormwater fee through a property-based Prop 218 process, which is not necessarily a vote at the ballot of all voters, but it's a majority protest vote of property owners. And there's a few cities, including in our region, that have implemented these of late. So it's kind of a novel approach, may have some legal risks. So we're looking at that, but if we would have the ability to put together an appropriately structured stormwater fee and avoid having to put that on the ballot for it to be enacted, that would be really attractive. The caveat, of course, being that when it comes to the property owners who are paying the fee, coming out of the same checkbook, right? So they're not freebies.
As far as planning for that, I'm looking at you, Dr. Miller, would this potentially, we would probably not consider this until we're on the other side of the master plan to understand not only the initial, I think, capital expenditure just to get us, but also thinking 20 and 40 years out. Because once we implement the stormwater fee, obviously we wouldn't want to overfee, but we also don't want to underfee. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think phase 1 of the report is anticipated towards the end of the fiscal year of the master plan. So a bump.
So there's the timing of both having the information to support putting this together, and then where would that process fit into our other revenue measure timing cycles. So some of the work that's currently underway is both updating our overall fiscal model, both in the context of the mid-year budget update, as well as the 5 and I'll add 10 and 20-year fiscal model. We're going to continue to refine and update the needs list, again, to help get some good numbers behind that, but also help align the solution with the problem there, analyze different tax measures and structures. As I said, align the funding strategy to address the needs, and then the timing and sequencing for some potential measures. And we do have some outside help of both fiscal model, technical support. We have an RFP that is about to close here shortly on for some additional polling services and some kind of strategic planning around how to lay this out for the council and public. In terms of couple of preliminary recommendations. So for June 2026, staff is eyeing a special tax measure on the June 2026. And first out the gate would potentially be the Measure D library tax renewal. Discussions thus far have really been about moving it at the existing rate, so it's not viewed as a tax increase. We'll be needing to do some polling between now and then, but it's a very short timeline. There is a potential to look at putting a different parcel tax on that ballot, but there's a fair amount of work that would be involved in doing that within the time frame we have. So, but those are kind of the two scenarios for June of 26. While at the same time looking at potentially putting a general purpose tax. And if we were to recommend it today, it would likely be a property transfer tax on the November 2026 ballot. It's also possible that what goes on the November 26 ballot is going to be informed by what happens in June and 26, because if we do with the library tax and it is unsuccessful, then that'll obviously inform what we may need to bring forward in November. This is again a reference to Measure E and Measure R. The idea, I think they expire in 2030 and 34 respectively. Thinking here is not wait until 2030 to put it on the measure on for renewal. And if it were to go on, there's a notion of consolidating the two into a single sales tax measure, doing it once, maybe doing a 20-year measure, and just having the sales tax kind of locked in.
And it would be that it would not be controversial because the tax rate is the tax rate we're already maxed out. It's just we would just reduce sales tax by 1%, and then it would just be money we couldn't recover from the community.
Yeah. And then what's worse is when you lose a sales tax measure, because there's a cap on the total that we can do. Some other jurisdiction can come in. No offense to our transportation agencies and all the others, but everybody's vying for the same sales tax.
Although you can get the cap raised by working with the state.
Yes.
So, and I don't see that up here. I mean, again, we're just really early, but we had talked about that.
Okay. No, that's
We did talk about
completely,
that.
yeah. And then again, the timing for a potential stormwater fee pending some more work on our ability to do it outside of bringing it to the voters. In terms of the timeline, we're going to be initiating some polling here very shortly. We're having the discussion today with the Finance Subcommittee. We would like to consider reconvening the subcommittee next month with a little bit more additional information so that we can have at least one more conversation, if not more, prior to bringing this forward to the full council. For the June 2026 ballot measure, that first bullet is somewhat of an internal timeline in terms of needing to have all the documentation and legal review, but we're talking about the end of January based on advice from legal counsel. Council action to call an election could be as early as the second meeting in February. I believe your first meeting in March is the last date with the 88-day election cycle. So we're on a really short, aggressive timeline for consideration of the June 26 ballot measure. And then just for November 26, you're looking end of July, August, so we're in the summer months.
July.
Almost on the heels of a June election, we're already needing to be contemplating potentially November, so that's a consideration. I just have, I think, that wraps up.
I'm sorry, Paul,
Yeah.
would you mind going back to the last slide
Absolutely.
real quick? If we have time at the end of the meeting, it would be most helpful if we could land on a date, as the time sensitivity of that and landing on that third week in January, I think is really important, but we can wait to the end.
I read the meeting.
But I don't want to turn it over to more questions if you have them.
Yeah.
So but go back.
We'll go back.
We'll go back. So the date, I mean, you have a much better sense of staff capacity to hit these dates. So to me, that's the driver of it. I think from the council perspective, it's really what you all are able to do. Going on the very last day, I think is always, there's other potential negative impacts of that. So
I mean, John has been working on a pretty detailed project plan in Asana to drive us back. I mean, it's a critical path. So we've got to, kind of week to week, make sure we're hitting the milestones to make sure we can get to the 17th. I mean, the 6th is a backdrop, but we're going to do everything we can to hit that date on the 17th.
The other question that we've been wrestling with internally, if I is whether it's important to have, a council conversation with a full council prior to showing up with, here's the recommendation that we need action on today. So that contemplates potentially kind of a discussion and feedback meeting prior to coming back with recommendation and action.
And I've asked Paul and John to join December upcoming one-on-ones with each council member to kind of
field their questions.
and start talking about mid-year budget and kind of like once we get a little bit more deep into the analysis on the fiscal model. So there's that foundation of kind of basis and understanding for kind of January, like the final recommendation. So we've got, moving toward the 17th and having everybody have the same information and clarity about what and why.
I think whatever, dates that you're able to hit, but I do think, and Councilmember Hill can speak for himself, but the June 2026 ballot measure, we're renewing an existing measure that is incredibly important to our library services. So I'm fully supportive of putting that on there. Obviously, I want to hear what the community has to say and everything and input. And to just say we're going to let this expire when we already know. We know that library is important because Measure P just passed. Yeah, I mean, we actually know already it's a community value, so.
Yeah, no, I concur. And I think too, even in the staff report around it, I know that we are going to need to rely on a trajectory of services to go with the expansion of people in programming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One thing that's going to be tricky about the polling is that, and the polling, John, would you remind me what it polled for last summer? Was it 60?
We were, well, for a special election in August, we were in like mid to low 60s and we needed a 2/3. And so when we factored in the margin of error, we were just right on the cusp of hitting that 67.
You really want to be at like 66 to feel that level of confidence. And so just to clarify, we're going to do the polling and we're going to do some split polling on a potential other public safety tax or something along those lines to get a sense of exactly what the final recommendation will be on June. Because if the polling for Measure D is not where we think and need it to be, and part of why we think it pulled that way last summer was because of Measure P. Like will the voter sentiment have shifted with a lapse in time or not is kind of left to be, is left to the polling. If we decide to go in a different direction than Measure D, it doesn't mean that would impact library services necessarily, because from a budgetary standpoint, what the general fund supports, right? That if any measure were to pass that augments the general fund, then we could budget accordingly to maintain service levels. There's like a balancing there. So just want to kind of put that like caveat to, we're going to really, and we should have preliminary polling by that third week of January.
That's what we're targeting.
Yeah.
So
So that's why we would want to have that finance committee and really nail down where we're going.
And you also have what other ballot measures might be on the June ballot, like for San Rafael residents, I know that,
Yeah.
the county, but that's Novato, so that won't be there because they do have the prelim that, they have
Yeah.
for Supervisor Lucan's spot, so they will have a ballot measure, but is it a single thing? It's like one thing we're asking San Rafael.
Well, we know like the SMART is gonna go for renewal. I know they just submitted their
That's right,
petitions
that's
and
right.
they got
Yeah.
like double what they needed. And then I know, we polled some of the other cities and I know Larkspur and Mill Valley are targeting some sort of measure in 2026. Like Mill Valley has their municipal services tax. That's been around for years, but it's due for a renewal in 26.
Really important for the council. No, I actually hadn't thought about there might be a halo effect if there are other cities and towns, even though our folks aren't voting on it, but they're
Yeah.
they're hearing the importance of talking about services, city
Yep.
services.
Part of the strategy is anticipating what the competition will be on that ballot for
Right.
voter fatigue for, more tax measures, parcel taxes. I did find out from Chandra Alexander with CAM that they're planning a November. It's, I think the universal preschool, or
The county's gonna put that on there.
it looks like that there's a coalition kind of forming to put it back on the ballot in November. So that's something for us.
Years, it was on the ballot 15 years ago,
Yeah.
similar.
And then it came back around, I think maybe 7, 8 years ago, and then I don't think it ever made it on the ballot, but there's been a number of attempts at that. So anyway,
Super interesting. Okay.
Like, hopefully the polling will also provide some insights into, because it's one thing to sort of say, here's some different options. Generally speaking, I'll say anecdotally, but there's data to support it. A renewal of an existing tax is generally easier to pass than, a new tax or tax increase. Particularly with the need for the kind of the legwork to be done.
Is Charles Heath, we working with that?
Yeah,
That's what.
for a strategy, yes, but as Paul said, we have the RFP out for polling services.
So that's a lot of information.
Yeah, no, and I think the backdrop too that we just cannot foresee is what's gonna happen with the ongoing federal changing in the funding. And I said more than once that I think it's still gonna be painful, and it's gonna start to be painful in a different way, I think, when all this is happening. So that might actually help what we're trying to do. I think people are gonna start feeling a pinch in a way that they don't today. I think they're gonna start feeling it, and I in this way, I really do, unfortunately. What else do you need from us? I mean, first of all, I'd say I appreciate the amount of work. It was a huge amount of work, but what I am so appreciative is that you're linking together all the disparate, because then if there's a policy that the city needs to be, that the council needs to approve in terms of we want to maintain baseline or whatever that is, now we can actually see the full scope in a way that we couldn't before. And I know there's still pieces coming from the Park and Rec and development, but I mean, the picture is you did a nice job of not being dire, but being serious. And yeah.
I think building on
Yeah.
those comments too, I think as you're painting this picture and I'm starting to see it, individually, each measure as it might go before the voter won't have that integrated narrative. I think, I'm curious about how we are envisioning how that would be communicated to the community, just to say, hey, over the next 8 years, there's going to be a series of renewals and things to make certain that the services that you want are coming forward. These are all interconnected. We wouldn't be able to say that in the ballot measures.
right.
But I think that I'm curious if, one of the, as we go forward, how we think about that, how that would be expressed to the community.
Yeah, I have some thoughts about that aren't fully shaped, but I really appreciate you asking the question. We're working on a communication engagement kind of playbook with Fel, who's now working in our office directly on this stuff. And so that's both a plan and an approach and a strategy, but also like an annual calendar and what the approach is going to be to for things like this, where there's a real story and a narrative. And to your point, you can't kind of take one thing at a time in a vacuum to try to get the community to really understand this global, what we're facing. And so the term town hall is, what people kind of understand, but the approach to sharing this, I mean, it'll come out through budget and strategic plan and work plan. So people that, it's one forum, but that's council meetings. But I think how we do a communication plan leading up to each one of these elections, and to your point, kind of packaging the story and having some community meetings specifically for people to understand what the city is facing and managing expectations. And we have to be mindful about timing around that with things like when they're on the ballot, because we can't go campaigning, but we can do the explaining and the communication piece that sets kind of that foundation for the why globally. Yeah.
And I love that too, because then you end up with ambassadors. Because the city does get constrained as you get closer, but as the people that are willing to dive in and understand the issues. I mean, that's how Measure P, that we had a built-in group of people that really understood it over the years.
Yeah, absolutely.
From your finance director's perspective, when we are in front of the council talking about the 26-27 budget, it can't just be about the 26-27 budget.
Exactly.
It's going to be sort of in the context of, and then it feeds the. We have some work to do, but our sleeves are rolled up.
Okay.
And a good team. Anything?
Thank you. No, not on this, and just looking at the time. So you had future agenda planning, but I think you talked about that.
Can we use that moment to look at the 20th and the 22nd? And one other planning for 2026 and future agenda items is we're in the process of trying to land on the consistent date and time for each one of the subcommittees for 2026. If you have any input for staff now on what days of the week and times, like, is it a Tuesday morning, Thursday morning?
Because he's the one that has more constraints.
Is it morning or afternoon that's ideal? So we can really try to attune to what works best.
And as I haven't adjourned the meeting, I do want to make an amendment to the minutes. And just my last name is spelled a little differently than it is in the minutes. So if you concur with that change.
I concur.
Okay, so we're gonna amend the minutes.
Typos don't need.
Typos, I don't know, but just.
We heard typos are okay.
Typos are. Okay.
Administrative correction.
Administrative correction. Okay, just want to put it on the record. Okay, so on the 20th, do you want to play the?
Yeah, 20th early is better for me.
Is early,
Like before 11.
is 10?
10 is plausible.
And feasible. Is that a good time in general?
Or do you want? Really? What?
Or would you
general.
want,
It's really, it's.
Yeah,
it's a-
in general, it's good.
would you prefer a 9 to a 10 in general?
No, 10 is fine.
Okay, so could we try to set a cadence for Tuesdays at 10 for that subcommittee going forward? Okay.
And the council hasn't approved it yet. It'll be at the December meeting, but you are also, so this is the finance subcommittee, but it's going to be a twofer because then there's the housing economic, which we kind of touched on. And I was thinking it's so great that it's two of us who both of those because they're so going to be interrelated for all of these conversations. That'll be the next one.
Want to pair those? Or spread them out?
That's up to you and here all day, but that's up to.
Probably too much, but there's an efficiency.
I would push it back to say, can you line up staff to be able to do them back to back, like double header? I don't know. It seems really, I can.
It's different staff. So I could talk to the team about it and see how Micah would feel about that. The goal for 26 is to be really planning ahead. So staff are, we have these predictable dates. And project managing to them, but
let's just go for Tuesdays at 10
for now. Okay.
And we can try to line up either or both. I don't know, back to back seems
like too much. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe it's always a Tuesday at 10, then it's either one or the other.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Good idea.
Oh, thank you, everyone. The meeting is adjourned.
I'll ask Lauren to do that rather than forgetful.
All right, thank you.
Your budget update in January 2026. I'm just trying to, right?
What?
Mid-year
Committee.
for the subcommittee.
For
Okay,
the
okay,
council.
okay. It's for the council. I know we talked about it last night.
Yeah.
What was the timing for the council?
Well, so no earlier than the second meeting in February, but there's a value in kind of lining it for work.
Yeah.
That's up, so it'll be.
Are you closing that down? You're just not closing.
We have like
Thank
impact.
you. Okay,
No, just-
Council, and so.
wait, hold on, it's still,
Maybe
on my
We could do like a public school impact fee,
there's an end
which
over
is
there.
actually what Priya's working on in our office. As a part of our work.
They should do a laptop.